Mom claimed they couldn't afford one more ticket, so my sister went on the cruise instead. When they got back, the house was cleared out, and everything I had paid for was gone. They completely lost it. Okay, lean in, because I'm about to tell you something that still makes my blood run cold and my heart pound, even though it's all behind me now. My mom looked at me with those wide, innocent eyes and said they could only afford one seat on the cruise. My sister was going, and I was expected to be mature about it. But they had absolutely no idea that while they were packing swimsuits and sunscreen, I was quietly packing up their entire house, receipt by painstaking receipt. You know that feeling? When you just know something is off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. That was the morning my mom announced the cruise. Sunlight filtered into the dining room of my parents' house, cutting long shadows across the table. The air smelled like coffee and the cinnamon rolls my mother only ever warmed up when she wanted something, or when she had bad news to deliver. I should have known right then, shouldn't I? She launched into it with a flair that would have made a Broadway actress jealous. Her hands danced through the air as she described the ocean view cabin, the all-you-can-eat breakfast buffet, the spa credits. She painted such a vivid picture, I could practically smell the salt air and feel the tropical sun on my skin. It sounds amazing, I said, genuinely happy for them. After the year they'd had, my dad's health scare in March, my mom's anxiety about his recovery, they deserved a break. When do we leave? The atmosphere shifted so abruptly, it felt like the temperature dropped 10 degrees. My mother's animated hands froze mid-gesture. My father suddenly became fascinated with his coffee mug. Lydia, my 29-year-old sister, who still hadn't figured out what she wanted to do with her life, looked anywhere but at me. Am I going to? I asked, that simple question hanging in the air like smoke. The silence didn't just hang there, it suffocated the room, pressing down on my chest until I had to remind myself to breathe. Instead of a flat rejection, which would have been honest at least, my mother reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her fingers were warm, her grip tight, and her face arranged itself into an expression of perfectly practiced guilt. "Hinsley, honey," she began, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper, dripping with the sweetness she reserved for manipulation disguised as maternal concern. "You know how hard this year has been. The Robinsons next door just got back from Italy. And your father, honestly, he feels like he's failing us. With the cut hours, he feels small. This cruise isn't just a vacation, it's about dignity. It's about showing everyone, showing himself, that he can still provide a premium life for his family." She squeezed my hand, looking at me with wet eyes. "The doctor said stress is his worst enemy right now. He needs space to breathe and relax, or I'm afraid he'll collapse. And the cabin we booked, it's the deluxe suite. It's designed for 3 people. Max buying a 4th ticket would have tilted the budget from tight to impossible. You understand, don't you? You've always been the sacrifice hitter for this team, Hinsley. We need you to take one for the team so your father can feel like a king for 10 days. I wanted to scream. I wanted to point out that Dad's need for dignity had never stopped him from inviting his poker buddies over to crowd around the dining table I'd bought. But I stayed quiet. And Lydia, Mom continued, her eyes getting misty on cue. She's so fragile right now. The situation with Trevor really shattered her. She needs this trip to find herself, to heal, to remember who she is without a man defining her. Lydia nodded solemnly, playing her role to perfection. Never mind that she'd been the one who cheated on Trevor, or that she'd bounced back within a week by going out clubbing every night. My mother's phrasing, the situation, was a masterclass in rewriting history to make Lydia the victim. Then came the killing blow, delivered with surgical precision. "You've always been the rock, Hinsley, the strong one, the responsible one." My mother squeezed my hand tighter. "We knew you'd be the only one mature enough to understand why we couldn't make it work for 4 people. You'll be fine holding down the fort, won't you? Someone needs to stay here, water the plants, collect the mail. You understand, don't you, sweetheart?" It wasn't a question, it was a command wrapped in flattery, a weaponized compliment designed to silence any protest before I could even form one. My father finally looked up from his coffee mug, clearing his throat. "It's been a tough year financially, Hinsley. We had to make some hard choices to keep up appearances. but you know we'd bring you if we could afford it." The lie sat between us like a third presence at the table. I knew the truth they weren't saying. I'd seen the credit card statement on the counter last week when I'd been organizing their mail, another one of my unofficial responsibilities. The cruise was charged to a card with an 18% interest rate. They hadn't saved for this trip, they'd financed it to impress the neighbors. And when the bills came due in a few months, when Dad's cut hours and medical expenses made it impossible to pay the minimum, they'd come to me, just like they always did. I thought about the $300 I'd quietly transferred to their account last November when the heating bill was overdue. The $500 I'd loaned them in February that was never mentioned again. The countless times I'd picked up groceries and never been reimbursed because you were already at the store anyway. But I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table or throw the cinnamon rolls against the wall, even though every cell in my body wanted to. I simply nodded. Of course, I heard myself say, "I understand. You guys deserve this." My mother's face flooded with relief. "Oh, honey, I knew you'd get it. You're such a good daughter." To understand why I didn't fight back in that moment, I need to explain the last 8 years of my life. At 26, fresh off a layoff from my first real job, I moved back home. It was supposed to be temporary, 3 months, maybe 6. There was no lease, no rental agreement, just a verbal understanding that I'd help where I can while I got back on my feet. I got back on my feet within 4 months. I landed my current job as an operations coordinator for a logistics company. It's not glamorous, and I'm not wealthy, but I make decent money and I'm good with budgets. Really good. But I never left. The help where I can evolved like a slow-growing tumor. First, it was contributing to groceries. Then the internet bill, because you use it the most for your work-from-home days. Then the electricity, because you leave your laptop charging overnight. Within a year, I was covering 3 utilities and buying household necessities whenever I noticed we were running low. Then came the furniture. The old sofa collapsed one Saturday morning, springs bursting through the cushions. I bought a replacement $1, $200 for a decent sectional that would last. The television died during the Super Bowl. I bought a new one, $800 for a smart TV with all the streaming capabilities my parents suddenly couldn't live without. The washer and dryer gave out 2 years ago. I replaced them both $1, $500 because my mother said she'd never trust a used appliance again after our old one. Flooded the laundry room. Kitchenware because our old pots were practically antiques. A dining table because the old one was an embarrassment when we have guests. Small appliances, a new microwave, a coffee maker, a stand mixer my mother insisted she needed and used exactly twice. Over $15,000 in total. I'd never added it up until recently, but the number lived in my mind now, a constant reminder. I wasn't wealthy. I was careful. I saved. I planned. Every purchase was a small sacrifice I told myself was temporary, an investment in family harmony. Meanwhile, Lydia lived like a bird, floating from one experience to another. She traveled to Mexico, to Colorado, to New York City. She went to concerts and music festivals. She changed jobs the way normal people change socks, never staying anywhere long enough to build savings or stability. And she was never asked to contribute a single penny because she needs experiences and she's still finding herself. I was 34. Apparently, I'd found myself years ago, and myself was a doormat. Saturday morning arrived with painful normalcy. The driveway bustled with activity, suitcases being loaded, last-minute items being remembered, my mother's frantic energy as she triple-checked passports and boarding passes. I stood on the porch, watching the organized chaos like a spectator at someone else's life. "Now remember," my mother said, turning to me with her travel purse already slung over her shoulder. "Water the plants twice a week. The fern is fussy, so check the soil before you water it. Collect the mail daily. I don't want the box overflowing, and keep the house tidy, please. We'll be exhausted when we get back, and I'd hate to come home to a mess." "Got it," I said. My father gave me an awkward side hug, the kind that said, "I feel vaguely guilty, but not enough to change anything." Lydia waved from the passenger seat, already scrolling through her phone. My mother paused at the car door, turning back with that same practiced expression of gratitude and sympathy. "You're such a good daughter, Hinsley. You always understand. We're so lucky to have you." The words should have felt like a hug. Instead, they felt like chains. I watched the car back out of the driveway, my mother waving enthusiastically through the window. I stood there until they turned the corner and disappeared, the sound of the engine fading into the quiet Saturday morning sounds of the neighborhood lawnmowers, dogs barking, children playing. In logistics, we have a term, catastrophic failure point. It's when a system has been running over capacity for so long that a single minor stressor causes the entire infrastructure to collapse. It's not about the last straw. It's about the years of ignored maintenance warnings. My love for them had been the maintenance crew, patching cracks, ignoring the alarms, keeping the facility running at my own expense. But as I looked at the fern on the windowsill, the fussy, demanding fern, I realized the crew had just quit. My emotional machinery didn't break, it simply switched modes. Manual override engaged. Emotional centers offline. Operational efficiency maximum. I didn't feel rage. Rage is messy. Rage is inefficient. What I felt was the cold, clarifying calm of a chaotic warehouse finally being organized. I walked back inside, closed the door, and locked it behind me. The house felt different already. Emptier. Not because they were gone, but because something in me had shifted the moment that car pulled away. I looked at the fern again. I was not going to water that fern. I was not going to collect the mail, tidy the house, or hold down any fort. I was done understanding. The silence in the house wasn't peaceful, it was revealing. For the first time in 8 years, I stood in the living room without the background noise of the television my father always kept on, without my mother's running commentary about neighborhood gossip or what needed fixing or cleaning, without Lydia's music bleeding through her bedroom door. Just silence. And in that silence, I could finally hear my own thoughts, without interruption. I walked through the room slowly, deliberately, like an inspector surveying a property. But I wasn't seeing a home anymore. I was seeing a ledger, a balance sheet of labor and money I'd never be repaid. The living room. The sectional sofa I'd bought with last year's Christmas bonus. $1,200. I remembered the sales associate promising it would last 15 years. I'd picked a neutral gray because Mom said it would go with everything. I ran my hand over the cushions, thinking about the 15 years I was supposed to have with this piece of furniture. Years I'd apparently gifted to people who couldn't even afford to take me on a cruise. The television, $800, purchased over 6 months of monthly payments because dropping that much cash at once would have destroyed my emergency fund. I'd set up all the streaming services, taught Dad how to use the remote, and watched my recommendations fill up with shows I never picked. The dining room. The table I'd saved 3 months to buy. Another $600 that somehow never got discussed as my table, but became the family table within a week. I traced my finger along the edge, remembering how proud I'd been when it was delivered. How stupid. The kitchen. The stand mixer, $300. The new coffee maker, $150. The set of pots and pans for $100 that replaced the embarrassing antiques my mother complained about. All of it top quality, because when I buy something, I buy it right. That was my philosophy, invest in good things that last. How ironic that I'd never applied that philosophy to relationships. The laundry room. The washer and dryer set. $1,500 total, purchased after our old machine flooded the floor, and my mother had a complete breakdown about mold and water damage. I'd researched models for 2 weeks, read hundreds of reviews, and picked the most reliable, consumer-rated set I could afford. These weren't just objects anymore, they were evidence. Evidence of a pattern I'd been too close to see. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, the smallest of the 3, because Lydia needed the bigger one for her creative space, which mostly meant piles of clothes and abandoned hobbies. I sat at my desk and pulled open the bottom drawer, extracting a navy blue folder I'd kept since college. It was a habit from my work as an operations coordinator. I documented everything. Order numbers, tracking confirmations, delivery dates, warranties. I filed receipts not because I suspected anything, but because losing documentation drove me crazy. If something broke under warranty, I needed proof of purchase. If a company overcharged me, I needed evidence. It was a professional habit, nothing more. Until now. I opened the folder. Bank statements going back 6 years, email confirmations from every major purchase, photos of receipts I'd snapped on my phone and forgotten about. Even a few handwritten notes I'd made during particularly expensive months, tracking where my money had gone. I spread them across my desk like pieces of a puzzle. Only this puzzle, when assembled, showed a picture I'd been avoiding for years: my exploitation. Sofa, $1,200. Check. Television, $800. Check. Washer and dryer, $1,500. Check. Dining table, $600. Check. Kitchen appliances, $850. Check. Kitchenware, $650. Check. Monthly utilities I'd been covering: internet, $80. Electricity averaged $150. Water during summer months, $60. Over 8 years. I opened my laptop and created a new Excel spreadsheet. Column A, item. Column B, cost. Column C, purchase date. Column D, current. Estimated value. My fingers moved across the keyboard automatically, that same efficiency I brought to logistics problems at work. This wasn't emotional anymore. This was data. Data I could quantify, organize, and weaponize. Total spent, $15,340. The number glowed on my screen like an accusation. $15,340. That was a decent used car. That was a year of rent. That was 6 months of savings I didn't have because I'd been furnishing someone else's life. This wasn't about the cruise. The cruise was just the final insult, the moment the pattern became impossible to ignore. This was about 8 years of being the responsible one, the rock, the daughter who always understands while being systematically drained. I closed the spreadsheet and sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. A water stain shaped like a cloud marked the corner, something I'd noticed 2 years ago and offered to have fixed. "Don't worry about it," Dad had said. "We'll get to it eventually." Eventually never came, but my contributions always did. The realization didn't crash over me like a wave. It crystallized, sharp and clear. I needed to leave. Not eventually, not after the cruise. Not after having a family meeting where I'd be gaslit into staying for just a little longer. No. Now. While they were gone. While I had 10 days to execute without interference. I opened my laptop again, but I didn't waste time browsing apartment listings or waiting for credit checks that take weeks. I'd learned long ago that residential moves are slow, bogged down by applications, reference checks, security deposit negotiations, and landlords who take forever to respond. Instead, I pulled up my corporate contacts from work. Our logistics company partners with corporate housing providers, furnished executive suites, designed for relocated employees, traveling consultants, people in transition who need move-in-ready solutions immediately. I scrolled through my saved emails until I found it. Coastal Executive Suites. I'd booked accommodations there for visiting regional managers at least a dozen times. I knew their process. I knew their turnaround time. And I knew they valued corporate relationships, which meant minimal paperwork and fast approval. I called the direct line, bypassing the website entirely. Coastal Executive Suites, this is Marcus. Hi Marcus, this is Hinsley Graham with Davidson Logistics. I need an emergency 30-day booking for myself, personal situation. What do you have available for immediate occupancy? Let me check. We have a 1-bedroom ocean view suite available now. It's $2,500 for the month, all utilities included, fully furnished, kitchen stocked with basics. Would need a credit card hold and your corporate employee ID for verification. $2,500. It was expensive, almost double what I'd pay for a regular apartment. But I had a secret weapon, an emergency fund I'd been quietly rebuilding since the washer and dryer disaster 2 years ago, specifically for a catastrophic event. I just didn't realize until now that the catastrophic event would be my own liberation. Perfect. I'll take it. How quickly can you have the paperwork ready? Give me 2 hours. I'll email everything over. I hung up and stared at my phone. 2 hours. In 2 hours, I'd have a place to go. A place that was mine, where I didn't owe anyone anything, where the furniture belonged to the rental company, and I could walk away when the lease ended without leaving thousands of dollars behind. My hands weren't shaking. They should have been. This was the biggest decision I'd made in years, but they were steady. This was how I operated under pressure at work. Identify the problem, find the most efficient solution, execute without emotion. Hesitation was the enemy of logistics. I spent those 2 hours not panicking, but planning. I pulled up a mental inventory of what I actually needed to take. My clothes, my laptop, my documents, my personal items. Everything else in this house, the furniture, the appliances, the kitchenware, belonged to me by purchase, but they could stay. Let them keep it. Let them realize exactly what I'd provided the moment it was gone. No, wait. Not everything would stay. I walked back downstairs, through each room, taking mental notes. The sofa stays. The TV stays. The washer and dryer stay. But I'd take the coffee maker, the good one, the one I bought because I actually like good coffee. I'd take the stand mixer my mother used twice. I'd take half the kitchenware, the pieces I actually used when I cooked for myself. No. Wrong approach. That was thinking like someone who still cared about being fair. New strategy. I'd take everything I bought. Everything with a receipt. Everything I could prove was mine. And I'd leave behind only what I felt generous enough to leave. My email pinged. The rental agreement from Coastal Executive Suites, ready for digital signature. I read through it carefully, occupational hazard, before signing. Move-in date, Tuesday. That gave me 3 days to execute the move during normal business hours, when none of the neighbors would question a moving truck. I set up mail forwarding online, effective Tuesday. My bank, my insurance company, my credit cards, all of it routing to the new address. On Sunday afternoon, sitting in my bedroom with signed contracts and a moving date secured, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. I wasn't the daughter, helping out anymore. I wasn't the rock, the responsible one, the mature person who always understands. I was Hinsley Graham, operations coordinator, and I was executing the most important logistics operation of my life, extracting myself from people who'd mistaken my competence for compliance. The plants could die. The mail could pile up. The house could sit empty and waiting. I had a beach view suite to move into, and 10 days to disappear before they ever knew I was gone. 2 days later, on a Tuesday morning that felt suspiciously ordinary, the quiet of the neighborhood was shattered by the low rumble of a professional moving truck backing into my parents' driveway. I had scheduled the movers for 8 a.m. sharp, early enough that most of the neighbors would already be at work, but late enough that I wouldn't look like I was sneaking around in the dark. The physical dismantling of my parents' house began with surprising efficiency. The crew chief, a stocky man with weathered hands and a clipboard, approached me at the front door. "Everything marked goes?" he asked, scanning the interior with professional indifference. I nodded, my throat tight but my resolve ironclad. Everything with a yellow tag. Nothing else. I had spent Sunday afternoon walking through the house with a roll of bright yellow stickers, methodically marking every single item I had purchased over the past 8 years. The sofa, where my mother held court during her phone marathons. Yellow tag. The flat-screen television my father watched for hours while I cooked dinner after work? Yellow tag. The dining table where Lydia never helped clear dishes? Yellow tag. The matching chairs, the washer, the dryer, the stand mixer in the kitchen, the coffee maker, the microwave, the bookshelf in the hallway, even the shower curtain in the main bathroom. Yellow tags everywhere, like a bizarre treasure hunt in reverse. The movers worked with the kind of practiced rhythm that comes from years of breaking down lives and reassembling them elsewhere. They wrapped the $1,200 sofa in thick blankets, securing it with industrial-strength tape. The $800 television was carefully nestled into a custom box. The washer and dryer, $1,500. As a set, were dollied out on reinforced hand trucks, their white surfaces gleaming in the morning light as they rolled down the front walk. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching the systematic erasure of 8 years of financial servitude. Each item that disappeared into the truck was a weight lifted from my chest. The dining table, the chairs, the area rug from the living room, the kitchen appliances, the bedding from the guest room I had occupied before moving out years ago, the towels, the cookware, the dishes, all of it, gone. I had intentionally left behind the items I didn't pay for, the things that existed in the house before I became the family ATM. My father's old, worn-out recliner sat in the corner, its brown fabric faded and pilling at the arms. A cheap brass lamp my mother had owned since the 80s stood on the floor beside it, its shade yellowed with age. Some dusty decorative pieces, ceramic figurines, and fake plants remained on the mantel, untouched by yellow tags. Those things weren't mine to take. I wasn't a thief. I was simply reclaiming what belonged to me. As the movers cleared the living room, the space transformed before my eyes. What had once been cluttered and suffocating became vast and hollow. The hardwood floors, usually hidden beneath furniture and rugs, stretched out bare and scuffed. Dust bunnies cowered in the corners where the sofa had stood. The walls looked naked without the television mounted on the center wall. And there, in the midst of all that emptiness, sat my father's recliner. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling something sharp and complicated twist in my chest. That chair, that pathetic, threadbare chair, was the only real furniture left in the entire living room. It looked absurd sitting there alone, a monument to dysfunction. An idea struck me with the force of poetry. I walked across the empty room, my footsteps echoing in the hollow space. Bending down, I gripped the sides of the recliner and began to drag it toward the center of the room. The old chair protested, its legs scraping against the floor with an awful screech, but I persisted. When I reached what I estimated to be the exact center of the living room, I stopped. With precise, deliberate movements, I straightened the chair. I adjusted it left, then right, eyeing the angles from different positions in the room until it was perfectly centered. I stepped back, studying my work with the critical eye of an artist evaluating a gallery installation. There. Perfect. The recliner sat alone in the vast, empty void like a throne in an abandoned kingdom. It was a visual representation of the irony that had defined my life for nearly a decade. I had just treated that worthless chair with more care, more respect, and more consideration than my parents had ever shown me. The room didn't feel sad. It felt honest. That's the last of it, the crew chief called from the front door. We're heading to the executive suite now. You following us there? Yes, I said, taking one last look around. I'll be right behind you. My friend Paige Holloway met me at the executive suite to help me settle in. She arrived carrying 2 iced coffees and wearing her trademark leather jacket, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun. Paige had been the first outsider to validate my reality when I finally confessed the extent of my family's financial exploitation months ago. Holy hell, Hinsley, she breathed, stepping into the furnished apartment. This place is gorgeous. It really was. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a slice of ocean in the distance. The kitchen had granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. The bedroom was spacious enough for a queen bed and a proper dresser. The furniture I'd brought from my parents' house, my furniture, fit perfectly in the living room. As we unpacked boxes in the new space, arranging throw pillows and hanging artwork, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I glanced at the screen. Mom. Mobile. My stomach clenched. They were calling from the cruise, probably checking if I had watered their ridiculous plants like the obedient daughter they assumed I'd always be. I stared at the screen, watching it light up and vibrate with each ring. Paige looked over, saw the name, and raised her eyebrows in silent question. I shook my head. The phone rang and rang until it finally went to voicemail. Seconds later, it buzzed again. A voicemail notification. I didn't listen to it. I turned the phone face down on the counter and went back to unpacking. You okay? Paige asked quietly. I'm perfect, I said, and I meant it. I spent the rest of the week settling into my new life. The executive suite became my sanctuary, a place where nobody demanded anything from me, where I could eat cereal for dinner if I wanted, where the only person I had to answer to was myself. The peace was terrifying at first. I kept expecting my mother to call with some emergency, some crisis that required my immediate financial intervention. I kept anticipating my father's guilt-tripping texts about his health. But my phone stayed quiet. They were on a cruise ship somewhere in the Caribbean, blissfully unaware that their safety net had vanished. Every morning, I woke up in my own space. I made coffee in my own coffee maker. I sat on my own sofa and looked out at the ocean. At work, I focused on logistics reports and shipping schedules with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Mark Feldman, my manager, commented that I seemed different, lighter, somehow. Big changes, I said vaguely, and he didn't press. But despite the peace, despite the rightness of what I had done, I couldn't fully relax. The clock was ticking. As Sunday evening approached, I found myself standing at my apartment window, watching the sky turn a bruised purple. Somewhere out there, a plane was landing, a cruise ship was docking. My parents and Lydia were returning to reality. I was safe in my new apartment, surrounded by my own belongings and my own choices. But I knew with the absolute certainty of someone who had spent 34 years learning the patterns of dysfunction that the storm was about to make landfall. The sun had barely set on Sunday evening when my phone began buzzing incessantly on my nightstand. I was in the kitchen making tea when the notifications started rolling in, text after text, call after call, all from numbers I recognized. Then my phone lit up with a message from Paige. A photo. I opened it, my heart hammering. The image showed my parents' house from the outside. In the frame stood my mother, my father, and Lydia, all frozen at the front door. My mother's hand was on the doorknob, but she was staring straight ahead through the open door into the house. Even in the grainy photo, I could see the shock on her face. Behind them, Lydia's expression was pure disbelief, her mouth slightly open as she stared into the completely empty living room. They had returned to a shell of a house. My phone immediately started ringing. Mom. Dad. Mom again. Lydia. A number I didn't recognize, probably a relative they'd already called to complain to. I silenced each call, my hands surprisingly steady. I had expected a delay in their reaction. Maybe they'd spend a few hours assessing the damage, maybe call a lawyer first, maybe work themselves into a proper fury before confronting me. But I had miscalculated one critical detail. My phone buzzed with a notification that made my blood run cold. Location shared with family group. My stomach dropped like an anchor. The family safety circle. The tracking feature they had insisted I enable on my iPhone. 3 years ago when my father was having health issues. Just in case something happens, my mother had said, so we can find each other in an emergency. But it was never about emergencies. It was about surveillance. It was about knowing where I was at all times, about maintaining control even when I wasn't physically in their presence. I had gotten so used to it being there that I'd completely forgotten to disable it before I moved out. They didn't need to find me through a letter or a forwarding address. They tracked me down digitally like a lost piece of luggage, following the little blue dot on their iPhone straight to my executive suite complex. That same night, less than 2 hours after they'd landed, they found me. The pounding on my door was aggressive enough to rattle the frame. Through the peephole, I could see all 3 of them, my mother in front, my father behind her looking exhausted from travel, and Lydia hovering in the background with her arms crossed. Hinsley, my mother shouted, her voice shrill even through the heavy door. We know you're in there. We can see you're here. More pounding. Harder this time. My mother was waving her phone at the door like she was trying to ward off evil spirits. Why aren't you answering? Open this door right now. I stood on the other side, watching them through the peephole, my heart racing, but my mind clear. The violation of my privacy, the fact that they had tracked me like I was a criminal instead of their daughter, it fueled my resolve more than their anger ever could. This was it. The moment I had been preparing for. I unlocked the door and opened it. They burst into my apartment like a SWAT team, my mother leading the charge. She stopped short when she saw the living room, saw her sofa, her television, her dining table, all arranged beautifully in my new space. What the hell do you think you're doing? She demanded, whirling on me. This was the strategic bait. I had to play this exactly right. I didn't scream back. I didn't try to justify myself immediately. I simply stood there, arms at my sides, and let them unload. My father stepped forward, his face red. We trusted you. We left you to watch the house, and you stripped it clean. But then his eyes darted to the spot where the TV was mounted on my wall, and I saw a flicker of something else. Calculation. He wasn't just mad the TV was gone. He was mad because he knew exactly who bought it. He knew the argument he was about to lose, and he was trying to shout loud enough to drown out the facts. Do you have any idea what we came home to? My mother's voice was climbing into hysteria. The house is empty. There's nothing left. Just your father's old chair sitting in the middle of the room like some kind of sick joke. Lydia finally spoke up from her position near the door, her voice dripping with disdain. I always knew you were jealous of me, but this is pathetic even for you. Jealous, I repeated quietly. Don't play dumb, Lydia snapped. You did this because you weren't invited on the cruise. Because Mom and Dad chose to spend time with me instead of their bitter, angry older daughter who's never had any fun in her life. My mother nodded vigorously. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're punishing us for leaving you behind. You took everything we have because you couldn't stand that we were happy without you. You left us with nothing, my father added, and there was something in his voice that might have been genuine hurt if I didn't know better. How could you be so cruel? I let the accusations wash over me like waves. Each one was designed to make me feel guilty, to make me apologize, to make me put everything back and resume my role as the family ATM. But I just stood there, silent, taking it. To them, my silence looked like guilt, my lack of defense looked like shame. I appeared to be taking the hit, absorbing their rage like I had always absorbed their demands and manipulations. My mother studied my face, searching for cracks. When she saw what she interpreted as defeat, her posture shifted. She had won. Or so she thought. We'll deal with this later, she said coldly, already turning toward the door. When you've had time to think about what you've done. They left in a huff of righteous indignation, my mother's parting words hanging in the air. You're going to regret this. The door closed behind them. I stood in my living room, surrounded by my own furniture, and allowed myself a small, grim smile. They thought they had the moral high ground. They thought I was just a bitter daughter who had acted out in a moment of petty revenge. They had no idea what was coming. Emboldened by my lack of defense, they launched their smear campaign within 24 hours. The story spread through the family network like wildfire. Phone calls to relatives. Posts on social media that carefully avoided specifics, but painted a clear picture of victimhood. Whispered conversations in church parking lots and grocery store checkout lines. The narrative was simple and devastating. I had abandoned them. I had stolen their belongings out of spite because I wasn't invited on the cruise. I had left them, an aging couple with health issues, with nothing but the clothes on their backs. By Tuesday, I was getting messages. A distant aunt, Hinsley, your mother called me in tears. How could you do this to them? A family friend I hadn't spoken to in years. She said you left them with nothing. How could you? A former neighbor. I always thought you were such a sweet girl. I'm so disappointed. Each message felt like a paper cut, small but stinging. My mother had always been a master manipulator, but this campaign was particularly effective. She had positioned herself as the victim of a cruel, ungrateful daughter. And people were buying it. I felt the sting of the attack on my character. For a brief moment, I wondered if I should defend myself immediately, post my receipts online, expose the truth for everyone to see. But I didn't panic. At work on Wednesday, my manager Mark Feldman pulled me aside. He was a no-nonsense man in his 50s who had always treated me with respect and fairness, qualities I had learned to appreciate after 34 years of conditional family love. You okay, Graham? He asked, studying my face. You seem distracted. Family stuff, I said vaguely. He nodded slowly. I don't ask for details unless you want to share them, but I've worked with you for 6 years, and I know you. You're one of the most responsible, reliable people I've ever managed. He paused. I don't know what's happening with your family, but I can tell you've been carrying more than anyone realizes, and whatever you did, I don't think it was wrong. The unexpected validation hit me harder than any of the accusatory messages. My throat tightened. Thank you. You don't have to thank me for stating facts, he said simply. Now get back to work. That shipment schedule isn't going to optimize itself. That evening, Paige came over with pizza and wine. She had seen some of the social media posts, my mother's vague but pointed comments about betrayal and heartbreak. "They're really going all out, huh?" Paige said, scrolling through her phone. "They think they've won," I replied, taking a sip of wine. "They think I'm the villain of the story." Paige sat down her phone and looked at me directly. "If taking your own things back makes you the villain in their story, then the problem existed long before you emptied that house." She was right. And more. Importantly, I was ready. I had let them take their shot. I had let them paint me as the bad guy. I had given them just enough rope to hang themselves. Now it was time to spring the trap. The phone calls had been relentless. 3 days of nonstop harassment from relatives I barely spoke to, suddenly very concerned about family unity and respect for your parents. Aunt Carol, who hadn't invited me to Thanksgiving in 5 years, left a voicemail calling me selfish and cruel. Uncle Jim texted paragraphs about how disappointed Grandma would be, never mind that Grandma had been dead for 7 years and never met half the furniture they were crying about. The smear campaign was working exactly as Mother had designed it. I was the ungrateful daughter. The thief. The one who abandoned her poor, struggling parents while they were on vacation. I let them talk. I let the rumors spread like wildfire through our extended family's group chats and Sunday dinner gossip sessions. I didn't defend myself, didn't explain, didn't justify. I just waited. Because I knew something they didn't. The truth had receipts. The meeting was Mother's idea. Naturally. She called it a family discussion to resolve this situation. Her voice on the phone had that practiced tremor, the one she used when she wanted people to think she was barely holding it together. "We need to talk about this, Hensley. Face to face. Like adults." I agreed immediately. Too immediately, probably, because there was a pause on her end, a flicker of uncertainty before she recovered. "Tomorrow. 2 o'clock. At the house." "I'll be there," I said. She expected an apology. She expected me to crack under the pressure of family judgment, to feel so guilty and ashamed that I'd bring everything back and beg forgiveness. She expected me to fold, the way I always had. I packed my iPad and a 3-ring binder into my messenger bag and drove to the house that no longer felt like home. They were waiting in the empty living room when I arrived, all 3 of them arranged like a tribunal. Mother sat in Father's old recliner, the only piece of furniture left in the entire house, positioned dead center in the room like a throne. Father stood beside her, arms crossed, trying to look stern despite the fact that he was leaning heavily on his cane. Lydia perched on the windowsill, scrolling through her phone with studied disinterest. The room echoed. Every footstep. Every breath. The absence of furniture made the space feel enormous and hostile. "You came," Mother said, as if she doubted it. "You asked me to." "We demanded it," Father corrected. "This has gone far enough, Hensley." I set my bag down carefully on the floor and straightened. "I agree." Mother's eyes narrowed. "Then you understand why we're upset. You stole from us." "I took what was mine." "Family property." "No." My voice cut through hers, sharp and clean. "Not family property. My property. Purchased with my money. And I can prove it." I reached into my bag and pulled out the binder, a thick, color-coded beast organized with the kind of precision that came from 8 years of running logistics operations. I set it on the floor between us with a satisfying thud. Then I pulled out my iPad, tapped it awake, and turned it to face them. "Everything I removed from this house," I said, my voice perfectly steady, "is something I paid for, and I have documentation for every single item." I opened the binder to the first tab section. Let's start with the living room. The spreadsheet on my iPad was a thing of beauty, color-coded, cross-referenced, sortable by date, by room, by cost. I'd spent 2 full evenings building it, importing data from 8 years of bank statements, credit card records, and email receipts. Every purchase. Every payment. Every proof. The sectional sofa. I tapped a line on the spreadsheet. Lane Furniture. Model Harper. $1,200. Here's the credit card statement. Here's the delivery receipt with my signature. I slid the relevant pages from the binder across the floor. Mother stared at them like they were written in a foreign language. The television. Samsung. 65-inch 4K. $800. Purchased when the old one died. Best Buy receipt. Extended warranty in my name. Another page. Another line highlighted on the screen. The coffee table. The end tables. The lamps. The area rug. I tapped through each one. Methodical and relentless. All mine. Purchased between 2017 and 2022. Total value for the living room alone, $4,300. Father's face was turning an alarming shade of red. This is ridiculous. The kitchen. I didn't let him finish. KitchenAid mixer. $350. Cuisinart food processor. $120. The entire set of all-clad cookware. $600. The kitchen table and chairs, solid oak. Custom ordered $900. We needed those things, Mother said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. You needed them. I bought them. I scrolled down. The washer and dryer. $1,500. Purchased when the old ones finally died. Installation included. Here's the Home Depot receipt. Here's the service warranty. Here's the credit card charge. I looked up at them, meeting each of their eyes in turn. The guest room furniture. Lydia's room. $800. The desk in the office. The filing cabinets. The bookshelf. The vacuum cleaner. The steam mop. The air purifier in the master bedroom. Tap, tap, tap. Each item lighting up on the screen, each receipt sliding across the floor. Would you like me to continue? Because I can. I have 8 years of documentation. Every appliance. Every piece of furniture. Every household item I purchased to keep this place functional, while you spent your money on cruises and wine club memberships and Lydia's travel fund. The silence was deafening. I zoomed out on the spreadsheet, showing them the full scope. The total value of items I removed from this house is $15,743. That's the sum at the bottom. That's what I invested in your comfort over 8 years while paying you $1,200 a month in rent. I let that sink in. Watched the math hit them like cold water. $15,000 in furniture and appliances, plus 96 months of rent at $1,200 per month. That's $115,200. That's what I gave you. And what did I get in return? Nobody answered. A bedroom, a curfew, a tracking app on my phone, and a family that called me selfish for wanting my own life. Mother's mouth opened and closed. Father looked at the papers scattered on the floor like they might spontaneously combust. Lydia had finally stopped scrolling, her phone forgotten in her lap. You said I stole from you, I continued, my voice still calm, still professional. But the truth is, you've been stealing from me for 8 years. You took my money, my time, my independence, and my dignity. You took and took and took, and you called it family. I closed the binder with a decisive snap. The only thing I took was what already belonged to me, and if you want to dispute that, I suggest you find a lawyer. Because I guarantee you won't like what they tell you about the legal definition of theft. The power in the room had shifted so completely it was almost visible. The empty space that was supposed to intimidate me, supposed to show me the destruction I'd caused, it showed them instead. It showed them exactly how much I'd carried, how much I'd provided, how much they'd depended on someone they treated like a servant. Mother tried one more time, we're still your parents. And I'm still your ATM, apparently. I picked up my iPad and tucked it back into my bag. But that account is closed now, permanently. I left the binder on the floor. A parting gift. Let them sit with it. Let them read through 8 years of evidence that they'd been exploiting me while calling it love. The meeting with Lydia happened 3 days later. Her idea, communicated through a terse text, "Can we talk?" Just us. That diner you like near the beach. I almost said no. Almost. But I wanted to see if she'd finally acknowledge her role in this, or if she'd keep playing the innocent bystander. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth by the window, her usual spot when we used to meet for brunch. She looked tired, no makeup, hair in a messy ponytail, wearing a sweatshirt I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. "Hey," she said when I slid into the seat across from her. "Hey." We ordered. She got the avocado toast and an iced latte. I got a turkey club and coffee. We ate in near silence, the kind of uncomfortable quiet that used to be filled with her stories about travel plans or whatever drama was happening in her friend group. The check came on a small black tray, placed exactly in the center of the table. Lydia glanced at it, then went back to her phone. Scrolling. Waiting. I watched her for a moment, this woman I'd protected and subsidized and enabled for years. My little sister, the golden child, the one who never had to worry because I worried for her. I picked up the check, calculated my portion, sandwich, coffee, tip, and placed 2 bills on the tray. $18 exactly. That's mine, I said, standing up. Lydia's head snapped up. She stared at the money, then at me, her expression shifting from confusion to comprehension to something like shock. Wait, what? My share. $18. I slung my bag over my shoulder. Your total is about $22. They take card at the register. Hensley. Her voice cracked slightly. Are you serious right now? Completely. She looked down at the check again, then at the money I'd left, then back at me. In that moment, the reality crashed over her, not the furniture, not the move, but this. This small, everyday interaction we'd had dozens of times, where I always paid because I always paid for everything. I can't believe you're doing this over $20, she said, but there was no heat in it, just disbelief. It's not about $20, Lydia. It's about the fact that you expected me to pay. Just like you expected me to pay for everything else. Just like you expected me to keep subsidizing your life while you figured out what you wanted to do with yourself. I didn't ask you to do any of that. You didn't have to. You just let me. I adjusted my bag. And you knew, didn't you? You knew Mom and Dad favored you. You knew they expected more from me than from you. You knew it was unfair. She didn't deny it. For once, she didn't deflect or play dumb or change the subject. Yeah, she said quietly. I knew. And you said nothing. Would it have changed anything if I did? It would have meant you saw me, really saw me, instead of just enjoying the benefits of my sacrifice. Lydia's eyes were shining now, but I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no desire to comfort her. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sure you are. Sorry it's over, probably. I headed for the door, then paused and looked back. Your tab's still on the table. Better handle it before they think you're dining and dashing. I left her there, staring at a $22 check like it was a mirror showing her something she didn't want to see. The smear campaign died within a week. Hard to call someone a thief when they have 8 years of receipts proving ownership. Hard to paint someone as cruel when they have documentation showing they paid over $100,000 in rent and expenses. I didn't blast my defense all over social media. I didn't need to. I simply responded to the family friends who reached out, Aunt Carol, Uncle Jim, a few cousins, with calm, factual corrections. I understand my parents told you I stole from them. That's not accurate. Everything I took, I purchased. I have receipts if you'd like to see them. Most didn't ask for proof. The confidence in my voice was proof enough. The narrative crumbled because it was built on a lie, and lies can't withstand the weight of truth, especially truth that comes with spreadsheets. Mother called 2 weeks later. We need to talk. Your father and I want to apologize. I met them at a cafe downtown. Neutral territory. Public space. Limited time. They looked older somehow. Diminished. Father's cane seemed more necessary than performative. Mother's makeup couldn't quite hide the stress lines. We're sorry, Father said first. We never realized how much you were doing, how much you were carrying. But his tone had that edge, that subtle inflection that made it my fault for not speaking up sooner, for not making my burden more visible. We thought you wanted to help, Mother added. We thought it made you happy to contribute to the family. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl into patterns. You thought I wanted to pay $1,200 a month in rent while buying all your furniture and having a curfew at 34? We didn't force you. You didn't have to. You just made it impossible to say no without being labeled selfish. I met her eyes. And when I finally did say no, when I finally took back what was mine, you tried to destroy my reputation. We were hurt, Father said. We reacted badly. You reacted exactly as you always have, by making yourselves the victims and me the villain. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the hiss of the espresso machine and the murmur of other conversations. "What do you want from us?" Mother asked finally. "What will it take to fix this?" "I don't want anything from you." "That's the point." I leaned back in my chair. "I'm not moving back. I'm not providing financial support anymore. If you need help, you figure it out. Get jobs. Downsize. Sell the house. That's not my problem to solve. But we're family. And families shouldn't exploit each other. Families shouldn't track each other's location like criminals. Families shouldn't play favorites and expect the unfavored one to just accept it." I pulled out my phone and showed them something I'd done the week before. I'd removed myself from the family safety circle. My location was now permanently, blissfully private. "I think you should consider therapy," I said. "Both of you. Maybe family counseling if Lydia's willing. But that's your choice. Your responsibility. Not my project to manage." Mother's face crumpled slightly. "So that's it? You're just done with us?" "I'm done being used by you. If you want a real relationship, one based on mutual respect and boundaries, I'm open to that. Eventually. But it starts with you acknowledging what you did and actually changing. Not just saying you're sorry because you lost your safety net." Father opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "We'll think about the therapy." "You do that." I stood up, leaving money for my coffee on the table. "And while you're thinking, maybe consider what Lydia is going to do now that I'm not paying for her lifestyle either." I left them there. Two people who'd spent so long taking that they'd forgotten how to give. The promotion came 6 weeks later. Mark called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. His expression unreadable. Closed the door. My stomach dropped. Had something gone wrong? Had they found some mistake in my work? "Your organizational system for the Henderson account," he said, pulling up something on his computer. I showed it to the regional director. She was impressed. Very impressed. I blinked. "Oh, thank you. We're creating a new position, Senior Operations Coordinator. It comes with a significant raise and your own team." He turned the monitor toward me, showing a job description that made my heart race. "I'd like to offer it to you." The salary was $30,000 more than I currently made. $30,000 that would go into my savings, my investments, my future, not into someone else's mortgage or vacation fund. "I accept," I said, my voice steady, despite the joy flooding through me. "Good." Mark smiled. Something rare for him. "You've been carrying a lot outside of work, Hensley. I don't know the details, but I've seen the change in you these last few months. You seem lighter." "I am," I said. I finally put down something I should have never picked up in the first place. My apartment became home slowly, deliberately. I bought a new couch, not expensive, not fancy, but mine, chosen by me for me. I hung artwork I actually liked instead of generic prints. I filled the bookshelf with books I wanted to read, not ones that looked good for display. I planted herbs on the kitchen windowsill, basil, rosemary, thyme. I watered them when they needed it, not when someone demanded it. I opened a high-yield savings account and watched the balance grow. Money that used to disappear into the void of family obligations now accumulated with purpose. Paige came over one Saturday with wine and takeout. We sat on my new couch, my space, and she raised her glass. "To freedom," she said. "To freedom," I echoed. "Do you regret it?" she asked later after we'd exhausted all the easy topics. "Leaving them?" I thought about it honestly, thought about the empty living room, the shocked faces, the moment everything changed. "No," I said. "I regret staying as long as I did. I regret all the years I let them convince me that sacrifice equaled love. But leaving?" I shook my head. "Leaving was the sanest thing I've ever done." "Have you talked to them since the cafe?" Mother texts occasionally, lukewarm attempts at connection. Father sent a birthday card. I shrugged. Lydia got a job, apparently. Retail. Part-time. It's a start. "And you?" "I'm good. Really good. Better than I've been in years. I'm not lonely. I'm not guilty. I'm just free." I look back now at the moment I walked out of that house with my things loaded into a truck, and I see it clearly. I didn't leave to punish them. I didn't leave for revenge or to teach them a lesson. I left to stop being used. I left to reclaim the life I'd put on hold for people who valued my utility more than my humanity. I left because staying would have killed something essential in me, the part that knew I deserved better, that believed I was worth more than an ATM with a heartbeat. They didn't recover quickly. The house went on the market 6 months later, too big, too expensive, without my contributions. They downsized to a condo, made adjustments, faced consequences. But I recovered. I recovered the moment I drove away with my furniture and didn't look back. Some people call it selfish. I call it survival. Some people call it cruel. I call it necessary. Some people say family should forgive anything. I say family shouldn't require forgiveness for basic respect in the first place. I am not their villain. I am not their victim. I am simply someone who finally chose herself. And that choice, that single decision to value my own life as much as I'd valued theirs, changed everything. The apartment is quiet tonight. Peaceful. The kind of silence that feels like contentment instead of loneliness. My herbs are thriving on the windowsill, my savings account is growing, my career is flourishing, and I am free. Finally. Completely. Unapologetically free.